something and something insult. When I walked into the conference room, my business partner of 6 years, the man who had shaken my hand the day we signed our first lease together, the man who had eaten Thanksgiving dinner at my mother's table twice, was sitting at the far end of a long oak table with 3 lawyers fanned out beside him, and he didn't look up. His assistant whispered something to him. He glanced over, and for exactly 1 second, his eyes met mine. Then he smiled. Not at me. More like someone smiling at a memory of something small and harmless. The kind of smile you give a child who thinks they can beat you at chess. I was 31 years old, standing in the doorway of an arbitration hearing for a company I had built with my own hands, and my former business partner had just smiled at me like I was already gone. I sat down on my side of the table, alone. No lawyer beside me, no legal pad covered in strategy notes. Just a slim folder, a bottle of water, and everything I had spent the last 4 months quietly learning in the dark. The arbitrator, a woman in her late 50s named Miss Hargrove, with silver reading glasses and the practiced patience of someone who had seen every variation of human greed walk through her door, looked at me over the rims of those glasses and asked the same question I had been asked 3 times already that morning. Mr. Callahan, you are proceeding without legal representation. You understand what that means for the complexity of today's proceeding? I do, I said. Across the table, one of my partner's lawyers leaned toward another and said something under his breath. The other one didn't bother hiding the short exhale through his nose. My partner finally looked at me directly. The smile was gone, replaced with something I can only describe as comfortable certainty, like a man who has already calculated the outcome of a card game before the first card is flipped. Okay, I thought. Good. Keep thinking that. I need to go back because none of this makes sense without the beginning. My partner and I started Callahan Voss Logistics 4 years out of college. He brought the client contacts. I brought the operations system I had spent 2 years building in my apartment. We were good together. Or I thought we were. The company grew fast. By our 3rd year, we were running freight coordination for 11 mid-sized manufacturers across the Southeast, and our projected revenue for that fiscal year was sitting at just over $4 million. I was proud of what we had built. I said that out loud more than once, to more than one person. I meant it every single time. What I didn't know, what I had no reason to suspect, was that my partner had been quietly restructuring how our revenue was reported for almost 18 months. Not all of it, just enough. He had created a secondary vendor account under a shell company his cousin managed in Tennessee. Invoices would go out to our clients under our company name, but a portion of the payment routing for what was billed as third-party freight coordination fees was looping through that shell company before a reduced amount returned to our actual operating account. The difference disappeared into a separate set of hands. The first time I noticed something, I didn't know what I was looking at. I had pulled our Q3 report late one Thursday night in October, cross-referencing it against the vendor payment schedule, and there was a line item that didn't match anything in my operating logs. It wasn't large, just under $9,000, attributed to a vendor called Tri-State Freight Coordination Services. I had never heard of them. I had certainly never approved them. I sent my partner a message. He replied the next morning and said it was a contractor he had brought in for overflow capacity during the August surge. He said he would send me the paperwork. He never did. I asked twice more. Both times he said he would get it to me. Both times nothing arrived. I sat with that for 2 weeks. I told myself there was probably an explanation. I told myself I was paranoid that 6 years of partnership didn't get thrown away over a single line item. I told myself a lot of things. But I also started keeping a separate log. Every invoice, every vendor entry, every payment routing confirmation I could access through our shared accounting system. I started downloading records quietly, systematically, building a parallel set of books that existed nowhere except my personal hard drive in a cloud folder with a name that looked like a string of random letters. 3 months later, I had enough to understand what I was actually looking at. The total diverted across 18 months was just over $312,000. I did not confront him. I did not call a lawyer. I did not tell anyone. I sat in my car in a parking garage for 45 minutes and thought about what I was going to do next. Then I drove home and kept building the file. He moved first. In February, I received a formal legal notice informing me that my partner was initiating a dissolution of partnership proceeding and seeking a buyout of my 50% stake based on a valuation his team had commissioned. The valuation placed the company's worth at significantly below what any honest reading of our growth trajectory would support. His offer for my share was just under $200,000. $200,000 for 4 years of my life, for the operating system I had designed, for the client relationships I had cultivated personally, for half of a company doing $4 million in annual revenue. There was also a clause. In exchange for the buyout payment, I would sign a comprehensive non-disparagement and non-disclosure agreement covering all aspects of company operations during my tenure. He wanted me to take the money, sign the paper, and disappear. I read the document twice. Then I set it on my kitchen counter and called my mother, not to ask for advice, but just to hear a voice that I knew was completely on my side. She asked me if I was okay. I told her I was fine and that I would call her in a few days. Then I sat down and formally requested arbitration. I spent the following 6 weeks doing something I had never done before, teaching myself the specific rules of commercial arbitration procedure, the evidentiary standards for financial fraud claims in a business dissolution context, and how to present forensic accounting findings to a non-specialist decision-maker in a way that was both technically accurate and completely understandable. I read case summaries until my eyes hurt. I watched recorded arbitration proceedings on a legal education platform I paid $40 a month to access. I called 2 lawyers, not to hire them, but to pay for 1-hour consultations in which I asked specific, prepared questions about procedure and evidence thresholds. I did not tell my partner or his team any of this. As far as they knew, I was an overwhelmed mid-level operator with no legal background, no representation, and no idea what I was walking into. They had every reason to believe that. I had given them no reason not to. That was intentional. The morning of the arbitration, I arrived 20 minutes early. Hargrove opened the session by establishing the scope of the proceeding. My partner's dissolution petition and buyout proposal on one side, my counter petition alleging financial misconduct and seeking full forensic review on the other. His lead attorney, a man named Mr. Mon Farrell, who had the clipped efficiency of someone who billed in 6-minute increments, immediately moved to have my counter petition narrowed on procedural grounds. I had anticipated this. I cited the specific procedural rule under the arbitration agreement we had both signed at the founding of our partnership, Section 12, subsection C, that explicitly preserved each party's right to raise claims of financial misconduct within a dissolution proceeding regardless of who initiated it. Ms. Hargrove looked at me for a moment. Then she looked at Mr. Farrell. "The counter petition stands," she said. It was a small moment, but across the table I saw my partner shift in his chair. Mr. Farrell proceeded to present the buyout case. It was polished and efficient. The commission valuation, the argument about market conditions, the claim that my operational contributions had declined in the final year of the partnership. That last part was careful language for saying that I had become a drag on the company's performance, a founding partner who had essentially been outgrown. I let him finish. I took one note. Then Ms. Hargrove turned to me. "Mr. Callahan, you may respond." I opened my folder. "I'd like to begin with the valuation," I said, "specifically, why it's off by approximately $800,000 on the low side, and then I'd like to explain what's been happening to the revenue that accounts for the difference." Mr. Farrell started to object. "Ms. Hargrove held up one hand without looking at him. "Let him continue," she said. I had built the presentation the way I had learned to build an operations system, in layers, each one supporting the next, nothing left unsupported. I started with the revenue records as they appeared in our official books. Then I introduced the parallel records I had compiled, the vendor entries, the payment routings, the invoices attributed to Tri-State Freight Coordination Services, and 2 other vendor names I had subsequently identified. I had cross-referenced every entry against our actual client contracts, our actual freight logs, and our actual operational records. There was no corresponding service. There was no overflow capacity that had ever been deployed. The vendor entries were, in plain language, fictional. I had printed every document. I had also prepared a simple 1-page summary that showed in a clear table the 18-month timeline of diversions, the amounts, and the vendor accounts they had passed through. I slid a copy of the summary across the table to Ms. Hargrove. I placed one in front of each of my partner's 3 lawyers. I placed one in front of my partner directly. He looked at it. I watched his face. The comfortable certainty was gone. Mr. Farrell put his hand over the summary on the table in front of him and said, Miss. Hargrove, I'd like to request a brief recess. We'll continue, she said, and her voice had changed slightly. Not louder. Quieter, actually. The way a room gets quiet when the temperature drops. Mr. Callahan, please walk us through the documentation. I did. It took 45 minutes. I went line by line to the summary, referencing the supporting documents behind each entry. I explained how I had identified the shell company structure. I explained the pattern of the diversions, how they had been timed to coincide with high-volume billing periods, when the volume of legitimate invoices would make a careful scan less likely to catch a discrepancy. I explained that the total across the 18-month period I had documented was $312,417. I was careful. I was specific. I did not editorialize and I did not raise my voice. I presented it the way you present something that doesn't need your emotion to make its point. When I finished, the room was very quiet. Miss Hargrove removed her reading glasses. She set them on the table. She looked at my partner for a long moment without speaking. He was looking at the summary page. He had not looked up in several minutes. Mr. Farrell requested the recess again. This time, Miss Hargrove granted 20 minutes. During that 20 minutes, I sat at the table alone, drank most of my water, and did not look across the room to where my partner was having an increasingly tense conversation with his legal team in the corner by the window. I could hear the register of the voices, not the words, but the shape of them. There was a sharpness to it that had not been there before. When we reconvened, Mr. Farrell informed Miss D. Hargrove that his client wished to request an adjournment to allow time for their own forensic accounting review of the documents I had submitted. Ms. Hargrove asked me if I had any objection. I have one question for Mr. Farrell first, I said. Does his client dispute that the vendor accounts I've documented exist? Not whether they reflect misconduct, just whether the accounts themselves and the payments exist as I've described. Mr. Farrell looked at his client. A very brief, very telling exchange. Then he looked back at Ms. Hargrove. We're not in a position to confirm or deny the specifics at this time. Then, I have no objection to an adjournment, I said. The records are real. They'll be just as real in 30 days. Ms. Hargrove almost smiled. Almost. The adjournment lasted 3 weeks, not 30 days. On a Tuesday afternoon, I received a call from a lawyer I had not spoken to before. Not Mr. Farrell, but a different attorney whose firm name I didn't recognize. She was polite, direct, and clearly operating under instructions to resolve this quickly. She informed me that her client, my partner, was prepared to revise the terms of the dissolution significantly. The new offer was a full forensic audit to be agreed upon by both parties, resolution of the financial claims I had raised, and a buyout of my partnership stake based on a fair market valuation to be conducted by an independent firm I selected. From a list we would negotiate jointly. There was no non-disclosure clause. There was no non-disparagement clause. I asked for 48 hours to consider. She said that was fine. I spent those 48 hours doing nothing related to the case. I went to see my mother. I helped her repo the tomato plants she keeps on her back porch every spring. She didn't ask many questions. She could tell I was in a particular kind of tired that doesn't respond well to questions. At the end of the second day, I called the attorney back and said I would accept the terms with 2 modifications. The independent valuation firm would be selected by Ms. Hargrove from a pre-approved list, not negotiated between the parties, and any forensic findings confirming the financial misconduct would be formally entered into the arbitration record, rather than resolved quietly off record. She went back to her client. 2 hours later, she called me back. He accepted both modifications. The final valuation placed my stake in the company at just under $1.4 million. The forensic accounting firm confirmed the diverted funds. The amount was entered into the arbitration record as stipulated. What happens next with that record, whether the appropriate authorities take interest in it, is not something I'm in a position to control. Nor am I trying to. I submitted what I found. I let the process work. My partner and I have not spoken since the morning of the adjournment. There are people who have asked me why I didn't hire a lawyer from the beginning. Some of them mean it as a criticism, like I was being reckless. Some of them ask it with genuine curiosity, like they're trying to understand the math of the decision. The honest answer is that I tried. I called 4 attorneys in the first week after I received the dissolution notice. The retainers they quoted range from $15,000 to $35,000 upfront, against hourly rates that would have put the total cost, by conservative estimate, somewhere between $60,000 and $100,000 before a resolution was reached. I didn't have that. Everything I had was tied up in the company itself, and the thing he was trying to take from me. So I did the only thing I could do. I learned what I needed to learn, I built what I needed to build, and I walked into that room. The smile he gave me when I walked in, that comfortable, certain, already calculated smile. I don't think about it the way you might expect. I don't think about it with satisfaction or with anger. I think about it mostly as information, as the last moment when he was operating on an assumption that I had spent 4 months making sure was wrong. He thought the company was the thing I had built. The documentation was the thing I had built. There is a difference, and by the time he understood it, the room had already gotten very quiet, and it was already too late to change what was going to happen next. I still have the operating system I designed. I'm already using it to build something new. This time I'm the only name on the door,